Good afternoon, everybody. Can you all hear me on Zoom?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic.
Now we can hear.
Great, thank you. My name is Kathy Crittenden. I'm with Infinity Title. Our office is right over off of Echo Lane, 950 Echo Lane, just down from Memorial High School. We're on the first floor, easy access, plenty of parking. We look forward to seeing you all sometime this year, hopefully sooner than later. And I'm going to just kind of quickly go through just a couple of quick things. Our team, we have 3 closers, Josh Green, Brandon Lopez, and Amanda Martinez. We also have Paul here, who's going to be our instructor today, attorney. We have an in-house examiner, and our underwriters are Fidelity, First American, and Integrity. So we are in really good standing with those 3 at the helm. So stay tuned. I have a lot of really great events coming up. I've reserved the pontoon boat for the Buffalo Bayou Tour.
Oh.
I also have, so that will be coming up in September. I've also, and there's only 21 people, actually like 15 that can fit. So when you see it, if you want to go, you need to register. I have of course, a lot of ladies round top that will be in October. Gentlemen, you're welcome to come as well. And then I also have the Nutcracker Market that's in November. But that aside, we do have lots of trainings coming up. I do have one this Wednesday. It's over at a model home, I can never pronounce it, Kehavnanian. It will be at their model home. If you want, I'll leave these around. Please leave it. You can scan the QR code to register. It's $10, 2 hours CE. And the course is hurricane and flood damage along with mold. It goes from 10 to 1 and lunch will be provided. So that's my next training. I'm going to go on and turn it over. Yes, those on Zoom, this is a CE class. If you would like to get credit, please turn your cameras on. And then what I'll need you to do is send me your name and license number. And then I will.
And we need to see your face.
We need to see your face for the credit. It's just like any other Zoom CE that you've attended in the past. Have your camera on, and there is no fee, and we'll get you on the roster. Okay. Perfect. Put it in the chat. So, okay. I'm going to turn it over.
Mine that I forgot it was CE.
No, we have a lot of fun things. Oh, and then by the way, tomorrow is the Crime Stoppers event that we have here tomorrow at 11. So with the pie group. So perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Clara, for having me.
Thank you, man. I'm going to see if this one.
Okay. Oh, perfect. Here. Yes. I'll put that back out there.
Okay. How about this guy? Can y'all hear me okay? My Zoomers, can you hear me?
Yes.
All good?
Yes, we can. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Kathy, thanks so much. Steve, Clara, thanks for having me. God, the technology, the room, it's always a pleasure coming here. Let's see, Kathy, I've got Legal 1 and 2 I'm still teaching. I do a lot of seller finance. I think I've still got an intro to commercial, the commercial contract, the residential contract. So anytime y'all would like me to come back, but divorce and death. I wrote this class many years ago and then went through my own awful scorched earth World War III divorce. There's down at the courthouse at the time my divorce was going on, there were divorce attorneys not even involved in my case that knew about my divorce. That's never a good thing when it's the scuttlebutt of the courthouse. But anyway, that which doesn't kill us, but it gave me a whole different perspective. So I think I'm a better teacher of divorce and real estate after going through a monster of one myself. Turned out okay. It's all good. It's over. But when I first licensed this class, the thought was I spend the first hour on kind of the legal, the real estate, the community property issues that go with Texas divorce law impacting real estate. I do 1 hour, and then some mortgage folks came in for the second hour and did you owe your spouse $100,000 from the equity of the sale of the home. Here's how we could refi that $100,000 that you owe. That's kind of like a second mortgage. We could roll that into a first. So the mortgage side of divorce, getting your spouse out of your life for good by refining them, what you owe them from the primary residence, you could call that. So Kathy and I kind of revamped it. It's like, well, it's a 2-hour class. Trek doesn't really care as long as I teach 2 hours of material. Let's do divorce still for the hour or so, and then slip death in there. I guess it's at the number one and number two least favorite things on the planet, maybe. So let's put them together and do death and divorce. So I apologize. It's called just the divorce side. Breaking up is hard to do. The impact of divorce on real estate sales. That's what you'll see on Track. But I promise you, 2 hours of elective MCE come with course 45446, but we're going to fill in that mortgage stuff. We're going to do death instead, the death impact on real estate. All right, a quick word. Kathy gave a nice pitch, but I founded Infinity Title in 2007. I can't believe it. We're in our 18th year of doing this. Nothing like starting a title company and the real estate business right before a huge downturn in 2008 and 2009. But, you know, young, dumb, still growing, didn't even feel it. So we came out of that fine. The interest rates dropped very low and we fed off of refis for those lean years and resales. So haven't looked back since. We've been very blessed. Look, we're considered a large boutique title company, 750 to 1,000 closings a year. Sounds like a lot, but you know, 3 different sets of closers. We try to be more like Starbucks than a fast food window, and we've got time to kind of craft on them and take on the hard deals, and we hope our service is a different level than you might see at certain larger title companies. We really appreciate every deal. I mean that. It's unique that we have an in-house real estate attorney. I sold the company a few years ago and they have let me stay on, and we're still happily coexisting. That I'm doing the legal stuff. I'm involved with a lot of commercial, the hard issues. God bless the 90% of residential deals don't touch my desk. 10% of them do. Those are the ones that have a wrinkle or two in them. We also have an in-house title examiner. That's unique for an independent title agency. Luminita sits in there. She's from Romania. I can't do her accent, or it always sounds like Schwarzenegger kind of, but she sits in there with her Coke bottle glasses and just cranks our in-house examinations. The beauty of that, a hard deal, we've got our examiner right there in the next office over. We need to impress someone with a 2-day title commitment that it needs to move that quickly. Lumi, can you bump this one up in the stack? You can't do that if you outsource your title exams. So we're lucky to have an in-house, and they're very hard to hire. You can't find these people anymore. It's all gone offshore. So we're lucky to have a title examiner in-house. Experienced, knowledgeable staff. Everyone there, I think, has at least their 10-year pin in the title business. And we close them all. We do not specialize in a particular type or limit our practice. Residential, commercial, seller financing, new homes, refis, estate sales. I see dead people in my sleep, we're going to talk about in a minute. FSBO. Oh my God, when the buyer and seller, a neighbor, a landlord tenant, they get together without a realtor and come bebopping in there for us to, if you don't think I appreciate you now, being in between me and the crazy buyers and sellers after a FSBO deal, I really miss you on those kind of deals, because that's me doing the job that ordinarily a realtor would do, working directly with them, but we do a few. And farm and ranch, we do some out in the country. We were ranked by Houston Business Journal in the largest title companies in Houston. We've made that top 20 list for, I think, at least 10 years straight and counting. Again, 750 in a light year, 1,000 in a boom year. I do tons of consultations on the side. Now that I sold the company, it frees me up to do more than ever. Probate, deed transfers, transfer on death deeds is a neat little instrument our state legislature came out with about 6 or 7 years ago. Oh, everyone needs a will. We're going to talk about in a second. With his and her kids, it's especially critical, but I do tons of transfer on death deeds, where when you pass, meet your maker someday, that property goes to them. But until then, you do whatever you want with it. Sell it, revoke that. If your kid makes you mad, revoke their TOD. I do tons of TODs. And we write our policies on the 2 largest. We've added another underwriter recently, but at the time of this slide, still Fidelity and First American. Number 1 and number 2 in terms of market share on the planet. So I kept things simple early on. Let me write on the 2 biggest insurers. So, all right, I'm a little bit of a history buff. Don't worry, we're not going to spend much time on it. But if you grow up in Texas, or I got here as soon as I could at age 25 maybe. And the only place I've ever practiced law is in Texas. I went to SMU Law. Texas law is all I know. You know, you kind of just dive right into community property without stopping to say why or how. How did Texas become a community property state? But that's what divorce law is all about, especially selling real estate out of a divorced couple is it community property or not? Is the seminal question. Well, you ever ask, why are we a community property state? Only 9 states and 1 US territory recognize a form of community property. We're very minority. There's just 9 of us. So Texas, Louisiana, Arizona, California, Washington, Idaho, Nevada, New Mexico, and Wisconsin, plus Puerto Rico is that US territory. What do those have in common? Is it fun to see California as a red state in red there? But what do they have in common? They were under Spanish or Spanish French rule at some point. So as opposed to English, Dutch, it comes from Castilian law. Going back further than that, I promise this will end the history lesson. But the Visigothic Code of Spain, going back to 466 to 485, and King Uric, a quote coming out of their second Visigothic Code: when persons of equal rank marry one another, and while living together, either increase or waste their property, where one is more wealthy than the other, they shall share in common the gains and losses. Hey, you want to say till death do us part? If marriage is supposed to be the ultimate partnership, then no matter who makes it, no matter who loses it, we're in this thing together, 50-50. Only 9 states feel that way, but we are one of them, and it dates back to Spanish rule. That code also acknowledged the separate property of a married woman, that she can come into the marriage with her family money, and it is separate. But although the code gave women equality of ownership, so ladies, if you like the Spanish concept there, yes, it's yours, you own it. But hang on, the actual management of the community estate was still given to the husband. It's your property, but you still probably need your man to lease it, sell it, deal with it, you know. So the respect for women and the marriage only went so far. Even in the United States, it wasn't until the 20th century that both spouses received equal rights of ownership and management and control. It's also no accident that those Western states, community property fostered because of the growth of the Wild West. Legislators wanted to safeguard family assets. There's a quote from the first Texas Constitutional Convention where, without community property, if we don't share in everything equally, if it was just his money, then a wife might be forced to sit weeping by and see the whole of her property wasted in midnight frolics by a drunken or gambling husband. I like the way they put that. That's out of our Texas Constitutional Convention. Men wanted to attract women to the Western frontier. It was harsh. You want to get wives out there, you want to get women on the West Coast, the gold rush to cross the plains, and then you're going to say you strike gold, you get rich, it's not half hers? So no, it is. Those are community property states. 50-50, dear. Anything we make is half yours during marriage. Now will you marry me and come out west? So, and it was a hard and dangerous life like her Visigothic sisters. So the community property system seemed to work well with those Western states, Texas, that ring around to the West Coast. So, and a shout out, that blog from the law office of Sandra Thompson, I just absolutely copied in there about where community property came from. Out of curiosity, how does it work in the other 41 states? There's an equitable distribution scheme. They had the concept of common law property, not community property, in determining who owns property acquired during the marriage. It's divided up at divorce or death according to the equitable distribution scheme. Under the scheme, property acquired is divided equitably, but not necessarily equally. All right, during marriage, you buy this clicker, it's 50-50 community property, right? We've got to somehow divide it or offset the value at divorce. Well, in equitable distribution states, the other 41, at divorce, hey, husband owns it, it's his, this property is his in his name, fine, but the judge, while respecting that ownership, he can't just walk away with everything. The judge is going to place Solomon with their assets and divide them up based on factors that we don't get into in Texas, like length of the marriage, current and future financial needs of each spouse, age and health of the spouses, and poor behavior by a spouse, debts, racking up debts, having affairs, whatnot. The other states get into that kind of stuff. In Texas, we keep it simpler. It doesn't really matter what you did, who you did, forgive me. It doesn't matter. We're going to split community property. We're going to put it in a basket and divide it 50-50 as best we can. 55-45 if we just can't split certain assets, but who cares what anyone did? That's how community property is divided in Texas. Yes, sir. Sure. Great question. We're going to hold it for just a second and we're going to get to that one, but absolutely. Separate property is respected in this state, subject to always exceptions, right? But we're going to look at the general rule. Think of, all right, so you've grown up, time to get married. Here was your life before marriage. Think of a huge, like a gate dropping down. You are now married. You jumped the broom. You said, I do. A couple is now married. That is the start of the community. The community lasts until divorce or death of one of them. Everything between those gates. The general rule, a legal presumption that's very, very hard to rebut in Texas. The lawyers don't even try for the most part anymore. But the legal presumption that any and all property acquired by either spouse during the community is community property owned 50-50 by the spouses, including real estate, homestead, investment property, commercial property, anything, clickers, notepads, anything acquired during marriage is presumed to be community property. The first thing the staff will ask that if we're dealing with a divorce situation, was the house community property? You know how we tell? Sure, we ask the clients, but go back and look at that deed when they bought it. You ever wonder why we label a single person, a married person, husband and wife? We're sending little signals to each other in the title community. Is that, were they single or were they married already when they bought that property? It's not required legally. If it bugs someone, people getting a divorce but still technically married don't really like being called husband and wife anymore, I don't have to put that language in a deed for the deed to be effective. But it is Luminita, again, our in-house title examiner, tells me it's awful helpful. Because would y'all believe the clients lie every once in a while, or at least have cloudy memory about were they married yet or not? And I can't tell you how many, oh no, I own that prior to marriage title guy. Okay, let me take a look at the deed. And guess what the deed says? Of course, husband and wife, they bought it while married. He didn't own it prior to marriage. But yes, sir.
So we bought our house when we were single and then got married when we could get married. So what does that mean?
So thank goodness you got married and everything's worked out, right? So
Right.
I did the same with my second ex-wife. So we bought 3 months before marriage. So that's two single people. You owned it 50-50 anyway. And I'll bet you were both on the deed reflected. It's kind of funny when I draft them, Paul Kaver, a single person, Kathy Critton, a single person. It's funny having two single people in there, but then you got married. It's not community property. You own it 50-50, separate property, but you end up at the same place if you bought it for cash. So only one of you needed to show up and sign for it. It still would have been 50-50 if during marriage, right? Y'all bought it as single people, but all good. You owned it 50-50. The general rule then, presumption that everything is owned 50-50. It does not matter who is listed as the record owner if the property was acquired during marriage. You know how many times, it's always been the men, I believe. You know how many times I've had to tell a husband that I don't care that he was the only one who went to closing because he bought for cash, and he's the only one that they reflected on the deed? Don't care. You were absolutely married in Texas when you bought that Texas property. I don't care that there's never been any ink in her name, or that HCAD only has you, or that you're the only one on the mortgage. Don't care, don't care, don't care. So my goal number one was to get to y'all today. You get it, 50-50 is that strong, no matter who's on the paperwork, who came to closing. During marriage is during marriage.
Can I
But we
ask?
will have some exceptions. Yes, sir. Sure. Good question. Hold that for one more blink of the clicker. The most common exception, so we're during the marriage and someone acquires a property through gift or inheritance from their side of the family, that is respected. Wherever I skipped a question a while ago, So we were talking about sole and separate before. We'll get back to that. But you were acquiring it during marriage. Paul, the gates went down. The community we're rolling through the community, happily married. She inherited her mother's house. It is hers, the wife's, and wife's alone, because of the separate property can flow into the community through a gift or inheritance situation. We will respect that. However, if they live there as husband and wife, now you've got homestead rights, and we're going to want them both to attend closing if it's their homestead. Or, not to really get into the divorce law, but I can't help it. I lived it for 7 years, start to finish. What if, yes, we agree, JR and I at the title company agree, it's her separate property. But in the World War III scorched earth divorce, that's the kind most people have, what if their regular old income, your paycheck is community property, right? Your own earnings during marriage are community property, owned 50-50 by each. No, the cash resulting from your earnings is 50-50. Some folks don't get that. But what if you replace the roof on her property with our money? That's still her sole and separate property. We didn't change the whole classification of the property, but in a nasty divorce, there is now a claim for reimbursement for the community of half the funds spent on her house should go back over to him, right? So maybe he gets a car or some stocks or whatever, but horse trade, her sole and separate is her sole and separate in the nasty divorce. Either owned prior to marriage, we respect that, or even if you inherit it during marriage, we respect that, sole and separate. But beware, if you spend community money, including regular earnings, paycheck earnings, insurance, taxes, the mortgage, upkeep, big repairs, and he can track that. The other spouse is savvy enough, they remember that. I know how much he spent, whatever. There's a claim for half of that coming back to his side. It's only fair, right? Our money got spent on your house that's outside of our split up here because it's your sole and separate. Half of that should come back to me. Any questions on sole and separate, the community? All right, yes, sir.
So I understand, hello, I understand about the separate properties coming into the marriage, but now if one of the spouses or partners manages the property, spends communal money to actively manage for 5 years, let's say, the property that was brought in separately by the other spouse, does that change the outlook on the reimbursements to the spouse?
I don't think so. Well, I'm getting more into what my divorce lawyer friends, if there's such thing. I don't think there's reimbursement for your sweat and your toil. You're entitled to, but upkeep into the house, improving the house itself. That's her asset. As black letter law, as community property is acquired during marriage, it's just as strong for sole and separate. They owned it before. That's not a community property. But so you're saying time, money, sweat? I'm not certain. But for sure, any dollars of community funds that went into it can be a claim for half back in the divorce. To Steve's point, prenups are generally enforced in Texas, but you're selling a house that's community property. Again, I only ride on Fidelity First American, and I hadn't asked the newest underwriter their policy yet. Fidelity and First American are not interested in reviewing that prenup and putting their head on the block for that. They are still going to make both spouses sign to sell. They will send me their 20-page It's too much of an uncertainty. Hey, you know title. We like 100%, right? We sell a backwards looking insurance product. Shame on us when there's a claim. We're not forecasting the next hurricane or hailstorm. We're going backwards. Is title good from today back to Texas joining the United States? We don't care what happens going forward. So we don't want to get into whether that prenup is really going to hold up or not. Was it well drafted? Was there good consideration for it? My divorce buddies tell me they generally do hold up or sure beat down the spouse's negotiating leverage that they know they're not going to get half of everything because of that prenup. But in the sale of real estate, when there's title insurers, when we're insuring title on the deal, the underwriters do not want to get into that prenup and whether that's going to hold up or not. During marriage equals both of you are signing 90% of the time. When your sellers are divorcing, all right, I want to get into the emotional side, just a little bit of it. I bet you all have dealt with divorcing folks. Remember, your clients are going through one of the most difficult periods of their lives. And now they're going to try to do a real estate sale with probably their most valuable asset during that time. Divorce is expensive, slow. My first divorce, I was still in law school and she was med school. So no kids, broke students. I kind of represented her too. I did it myself, the paperwork. So it takes a 60-day cooling off period. We got divorced on the 61st day after the 60-day cooling off period. I don't know if I thought all divorces were going to be that easy, but my second one, after 17 years, 4 kids, starting a pretty good little title company, was a little bit more complicated. But it's slow because if either side wants, if y'all are blessed enough to have not been divorced or don't know anyone real close, it is the most delay-ridden environment I've ever seen. As a businessman and a title closer, I like to set a date, work for it. We will move mountains to achieve that date. Down at divorce court, if either side wants a continuance, I don't care if they've had 5 in a row, but the judge always seems to be willing to kick that can for another 90 days or 180 days. So it's very slow. Folks who think that their divorce is going to breeze right on through. No, we're not angry. No one did anything stupid. We know how we're going, no, I can't explain why. No one does it in 60 days. You're darn lucky in Harris County, a year to 18 months for a not hotly contested divorce. It's just a slow system. It's embarrassing. All your baggage is aired out down there. Incredibly tough on children, mentally and physically exhausting. So trying to represent a husband and wife while they're getting divorced will make you earn every penny of that commission and then some. But when you are, it's simple though. The law is simple. We don't count divorcing. Is there legal separation in Texas? No. This in California. Brad and Angelina have were legally separated for years before their divorce finalized. We don't have it. You're married or you're not. The gate is either down, the gate doesn't drop until the final decree is signed by the judge and entered with the court. So when you're the listing agent and you know this couple's divorcing, you treat them as co-owners for all situations, everything, both signing the listing agreement, the contract, all closing documents. Believe me, early on when we rolled with just one spouse on the contract and we got to closing, we need both of them. Guess what happened to the spouse that hadn't been involved at all in that process? Nah. On Christmas Eve, we had one teed up one year. 2009 or so, and the spouse did not show. So include them both, because we're going to need them both to sign and close, or you could end up with nothing after all that work. No legal separation. We can close them at separate times if they don't want to sign together. Fine with us. Book 2 different appointment times. If things are still that hostile, we really don't want you in there at the same time. Although I was telling Steve, I've had better luck with divorcing couples behave better at the title company than siblings do after the last parent dies. We'll talk about death in a bit. But what to do with the sales proceeds? They're still married, so there's no divorce decree saying what happens to it. They sold the house while still getting divorced. Fine. We need you two to tell us and agree what to do with the bottom line money. I've seen we split it up and sent it to both, involving their lawyers, of course, to make sure they're involved in the process. We've divided it and sent it to their lawyers. The lawyers like that idea. I bet that helps them get paid, maybe, when the sale of the house money goes straight to the law firm and they hold it in their IOTA account, a lawyer's trust account. I've even sent it all to one of their lawyers. I guess the other trusting that he loses his bar card if he runs off with that money or something. That's as good as at a bank. I'm not sure I felt that way about Bobby Newman representing my ex, but I don't think I would have let him sit on the money. But anyway, we got to figure that out. But we do it all the time while still divorcing. We sell that house. Who knows when their divorce finalizes? Treat them as married the whole way through. It's that simple. That's the easy one. How about if they are divorced? Did the divorce lawyers get it right? Is the $1 million question. I really should teach this class or this part of the class to the divorce bar downtown or something more than to realtors. But if you know your seller is selling a property, a good friend, you know they went through a divorce, they tell you they got the property in the divorce. No problem. I got it. It's good to go. Please, 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 if you can get a hold of that divorce decree, we're going to need it eventually. It will come up during our title exam even. So you don't want to ask them for it. Hey, Paul, JR, would you go ahead and open title? I've got a divorce situation. She got the house in the divorce. Would you double check? And you bet. We will pull that decree. That's part of what our examiner does in a title exam. Divorce decrees pop up. Did they really get it to the point they can sell it alone? Or is that thing still owned 50-50 because of the way the decree was drafted? The lawyers only get it right about half the time. What do you think?
Question, does the divorce change the deed of the property?
Great question.
Or does the divorce always have to be attached to that deed?
Great question. I love it. Ideally, the best practice, the decree's job is to spell out a whole bunch of things, right? That's why even in a not real nasty divorce, it's 30 pages. The custody part is 20 pages usually, when little Johnny is on spring break in odd number years versus even. But the decree is a court order that does a whole bunch of things. Set custody, set child support, divide property. So if they get it right, the language in the decree, the full legal description you can only get from the title people, not lot block, not the lot block legal description you get from HCAD. For God's sake, not the street address. Kathy, did you send me someone the other day? Could they sell it? I think it was a referral from you.
It was me. It was me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I won't completely out the facts, but let's just say the drafting was less than ideal by the divorce lawyers on that one.
Yeah, the drafting, it's wrong. So now she went back to the original lawyer and she's stuck there. She cannot do anything with the property. Yeah.
There is a provision at the end of the decree that if we need clarifying orders, but I don't know that any Harris County divorce judge will let you reopen it because you screwed up the legal description. I hate that, but thank you. I thought it came from this group. So it just depends. Do the lawyers get it right? If well drafted, yes, it could act like a deed, but it's in the wrong court. That's in the civil court, the marriage records. We could take a certified copy of that. That's what Mary and I were talking. We could have taken a certified copy, record it in my world, the property records, and it will act like a deed. But the best practice, no matter how well written your decree is, and again, it's 40 or 50 pages to record that sucker in the property records, it's $250. And you want to air out Johnny's custody schedule in a much larger database of people. I guess generally only title examiners look in the, but still. So, but the ideal practice, a well-written decree, kind of like a backup parachute, and the simple little 2 or 3 page deed that goes with it, where the divested spouse deeds out. We make sure that thing gets recorded after the decree, concurrently or after it. We don't want any deeds during the community. No deeds between spouses are respected by the title people. While married, you can't really give your property back and forth. I've argued that with divorce lawyers. You can absolutely gift a property between spouses, Paul. Fine. But I work for my title insurers, my underwriters at the end of the day. They don't respect it. That's all I can't insure on it. But if done right, the decree plus the deed is ideal. So far, if I was keeping up with the numbers, I see it done right maybe 1/3 of the time, well less than half. Maybe only the problem children come to me, but it's not a great track record out there.
So that does not change who owns it on the note, though. They're still responsible on the note, are they not?
Absolutely.
So the best thing is for them to then refi separately.
That's right. Put a drop dead time limit in there to refi, to sell. We're going to have a horror story on that in a second. Good. What do we look for in a proper decree? I've kind of alluded to it already. Good, clear language. One spouse is awarded it as their, what are our magic words? Sole and separate property. A decree is a court order, and a judge can bang that gavel and turn it into their sole and separate. So it is their sole and separate, and spouse 2 is divested of any interest in the property. We need those magic words. Words count when they're in a legal document. We need it to say that. And we need a good legal description, the full volume page of the recorded plat that you only get from title people or the deed if you've got the closing docs. If the divorce lawyers would just call me, if they would just call me for free, I would give them a good legal description. If they would quit putting the street address or see Exhibit A and it's not there, or a lot blocked from HCAD but without the rest, if they would just ask me, I'd do it gratis. But that's bad drafting. Or how about this loosey-goosey stuff? Petitioner will be allowed to live in the house, and respondent will pay the mortgage, taxes, and insurance, and they'll hire an agent and sell the house by such and such date, and one of them will get the first whatever, How do you think we're going to treat that at closing? They're fully divorced, but that garbage is in the decree about the sale of the primary. Did it say one of them gets it as their own sole and separate? No. You're both going to come to the closing table. Don't like the result? Call your divorce lawyer. The decree says only one party gets it, but fails to list it. Does it list the property? I see it mostly in the little do-it-yourself fill in the forms. When you listed a few properties, why didn't you include this one? Well, it was mine before marriage, so I didn't think I had to. Well, why wouldn't you spell that out though when you list each other sole and separate? You've muddied the water of what otherwise would have been purely sole and separate prior to marriage by your decree not emphasizing it. So I may need them. I'll ask my underwriters, but I think they're probably both invited to closing. The decree needs to be so clear we can record it and it act like a deed if push comes to shove. Best practice, again, the well-worded decree plus the deed like belts and suspenders. The scary thing, a crap decree, no deed. 5 years later, ex-husband got some federal tax liens that attach to him. Guess what? From a legal perspective, they both still own the property because no one got divested of it at the decree stage. She had to deal with his FTLs. Now, the IRS, to be heartless in many ways, there is actually innocent spouse relief but how many months is that going to take? And the problem we have them come in there with the conscience. If we don't jump on some of these issues early enough, I'm not just trying to put my foot in the door, because there's nothing like working on a file a little on the front end, then losing it during negotiation. That's life. But it takes time to resolve some of these issues. And when a buyer's out there, we've got a closing date we're staring at in 2 weeks. It's tough to, you think we can round up that ex-spouse or get these issues resolved? That's why I love to know sooner rather than later if the decree is crap or something we could roll with, or did they get it right? I hate to be so negative. Did they get it right? How about when they're happily married, going to be married till one of them dies? Let's switch over to something more positive. They're married, but damn it, one of them wants to sign a loan. They do not want both to come. On the seller side first, one spouse, hey, or oftentimes both, consider the property acquired during marriage as one spouse's alone, and is absolutely insulted that we need the other spouse to sign. I get it from the husband. I get it from the wife. So why do you need me there? I'm at work. Because you bought the property during marriage. Maybe they don't know they're in a community property state. It's just because it's what I do for a living. If it's not their homestead, even better, vacant land, but not their homestead. I don't want to open up HCAD and see a big old homestead exemption on it. But if it's not their homestead, we might be able to do an affidavit of non-homestead where the spouse that's too busy to come to closing or he doesn't want her there can sign my affidavit I whip up. Hey, that property's not my homestead. We live over here. Driver's license matches it. So I divest it. He owned it before, or even if you acquired it during, I claim no interest in it. What can she do? Come back and come after me or her divorce lawyer after she signs something like that? So if it's not their homestead and you can satisfy us, we might be able to roll with an affidavit. But you know how the argument to not make me draft an extra piece of paper? If she's got to sign one notarized document anyway, could she just come in and sign the deed versus the affidavit of non-homestead to where she doesn't have to appear on the deed? But folks are funny. Sometimes he just doesn't want her on anything at closing. So fine, if you got to have it, title guy, send me your affidavit. I hope she really signs it and that notary's for real. But anyway, sometimes if it's not their homestead, if it is their homestead, forget about it. If acquired during marriage and it is their marital homestead, even if it was his prior to marriage, homestead laws in Texas, you can't kick a spouse out of their homestead. I helped shore up with an affidavit of heirship. 2 daughters inherited their mom's sole and separate property. But guess what her existing spouse has? She died without a will. He has a life estate till he cannot be kicked out of that house until he dies. So we need this. If it is their homestead, we're stuck. She's absolutely going to have to come in and sign the deed, at least the deed to the buyer. I can't work around that with an affidavit of non-homestead because it is their homestead. That's the seller side when married, but they just really want to just one of them sign. Over on the buy side, homestead going the other direction. It's a lender's call. I don't care. But the lender will always want both spouses to sign the deed of trust at least, because think about it. The deed of trust is the lien. Hey, if it cross-references a note, if they don't pay the note, the deed of trust lets me foreclose on that property, right? And if you believe me that anything acquired during marriage is owned 50-50, if only one spouse signs the deed of trust, how much of the property does your lien cover? If they only own half, you can't grant a lien on more than you own. So the house only has a 50% lien on it. Lenders don't want a loan on a 50% lien, so they're at least going to make the spouse sign the deed of trust and a few other documents. If it's homestead property they're buying, therefore they got an owner-occupied kind of loan from their lender. Investment property with a lot more leeway. We see plenty of lenders that will allow one spouse to sign a loan if it's not homestead property. Cash purchase, absolutely don't care. Cash is king, cash is cash. If you're a blessed cash buyer, we don't care which one of you comes to closing, but we need you to wire that money. It's the money is the star of a cash purchase. Can I still add my wife to the deed even though I'm the only one coming in? You bet. because in Texas, the seller signs the deed, you know, so you bet we'll put her on there if you instruct us to. Any question on buyers and sellers wanting to sign a loan, but they're married, while married?
So I do have maybe a dumb question.
There are no
So
dumb questions.
If, as a realtor, I get approached by a couple and it's common knowledge, knowledge that they're divorcing. So you said it takes a while to get the decree, correct? Am I allowed to place that house on the market if I know they're getting a divorce? Do I have to wait for the decree to come through, or can they sell it while they're getting divorced?
Great question. That's not a dumb question. We had one a couple of weeks ago, Kathy. Was it one of yours or? We want their lawyers involved. So we, you know, to not throw us any curves, you know, and the lawyers will kind of rein them in a little bit if it's an emotional mess. But absolutely, divorces take a long, hey, they may need that money out of that thing to get divorced. So we do it all the time. And to tell you the truth, it might be cleaner. That might be cleaner than reading a screwed up decree and trying to, you know, that is not strong enough like a deed, or sorting out who needs to sign. So it's the $1 million question is sometimes what to do with the $1 million. That bottom line, good, clear directions in writing where that goes. Lawyers, split it and give it to each of you. Doesn't matter to me, but we want their lawyers involved, kind of keeps it on track. But you bet, we do it all the time, because that divorce is going to go and go and go. Anytime.
Well, I also wonder where's my fiduciary responsibility too, as a realtor? Which one
I'd say both.
both?
I would say
Or
absolutely.
yeah, if you go with one or the other, favor one of the.
And we're human beings.
Right.
You're going to be closer to one of them. I'll bet you anything. One of them wanted to use you. You're just lucky the other one didn't nix you because they don't agree on the color of the sky right now. But yeah, at least if they both signed that listing agreement, that's a huge step that they both at least docu-signed and got you on board. Congratulations if you can get a divorcing husband and wife to agree on that at least. But yeah, we do it all the time. Divorce horror story 1. Ooh, it's a commercial one even. After 3 failed contracts, a commercial property, a warehouse by a good buddy of mine, was a listing agent, gets under contract for 14 mil. To a cash 1031. We not only have the money, it's coming 1031. We know it's going to be there. That the sale property is under contract. Commissions, not that y'all care about this kind of stuff, but 2.5. So that's 350,000 aside. One of the owners, why is it always the minority owners? A 45% interest of the selling LLC is getting a nasty divorce, and he's, as it turns out, he's fighting with his own lawyer. He's not getting along with his own lawyer. So they're not really watching the process. He allows his wife to get, and Bobby Newman, to get temporary orders in place that say she is to be involved in all aspects of the selling LLC's assets and operations. Well, she's not even an owner. It's a 45% interest. The 55% wants to sell to that cash buyer tomorrow, like it's his next breath of air. I went to my underwriters. I did 10 years of corporate law before I started the title company, but still, she is not an owner. But she's got these little temporary orders. I asked both of the underwriters. Every once in a while, I go to Fidelity and First American. They don't know I'm asking both of them. But yeah, growing up, did you ever ask your mom permission or something? She said, no. Yes, your dad. You just hope they don't, touch base. But showed them the temporary orders. They both said, Paul, we're not getting in the middle of that. Yes, we want her consent. Treat her as if she's an owner. We can't sell without her consent. So the spouse of a 45% minority owner is blocking this deal. Husband refuses to approach her to get her consent. They're oh my gosh, I'm reading their divorce pleadings. Just why can't, what is keeping them from letting this sale go through? Oh, they're fighting over which private schools the children should attend, payment of the property taxes on the primary residence, child support, alimony. They're fighting about everything else in the world while I just want to get the $14 million warehouse sold. The sale sits on hold for 2 extra months. 1031 is timely. Have y'all done many 1031s? The clock starts ticking loud upon the sale. You've got to identify the other property and close it within X days. The clock is ticking. What saved our tail, as many times as a hurricane has bitten me, this one was a blessing. The buyer's 1031 sale property in Florida, it was just vacant land, but it still got roughed up by a hurricane and delayed the closing on that side, on the cash buyer, and let us catch up and finally get these folks in order. We closed it. Infinity escrowed that 45% of the share. Oh, I forget of which lawyer did we have to split it. The lawyers agreed on who holds it and distributed the rest to the principals. Happy ending. But again, what if the buyer was ready to close and we weren't able to because we've got a divorcing seller? So that one worked out. Divorce
I
horror
ask
story
you-
number 2.
I ask a
Yes, Mary, go ahead.
for when it's an LLC and the husband is 100% owner, so that makes it simple. I mean, then you don't have to share.
Great question. The folks that do want to, hey, I never want to have this problem again, Paul. I'll bother my wife to sign this time, but how do I avoid it? We respect an LLC form with only one, a sole manager, we call it, takes you out of the husband and wife issues. The LLC is the legal entity. The sole manager has the ability to quarterback that thing, buy, sell, refi, whatever, and we don't care or get into married or not married. That's a great question. I need to add that to a slide. Another kind of an exception, LLC ownership. Great question. Divorce horror story number 2. We'll cross that bridge later. Wife got the property in the divorce. Good news. We've got good language in the divorce decree. Mortgage, where we talk about the note, can't change a note. The note is in the husband's name. Husband deeds the property over to wife. The wife gives him this thing called an assumption deed of trust. Think of it like a second lien deed of trust. She agrees to keep that first mortgage paid. If she does it, he gets to foreclose on her. Well, so she commits to making payments on the mortgage to keep it current and to refi the property out of his name, out of that note, within 12 months. She was 43, had no job, had never had a job before. Husband asks attorney, how is she ever going to refinance the property out of my name without a job, without any income? Do y'all know any lenders who are making those kind of loans these days or in any other kind of environment? Attorney said, we'll cross that bridge later. This settlement resolves all of the property issues and custody issues. Maybe she'll find a way or realize she's got to sell it. She made 2 whole mortgage payments and then missed the next 6. You know what it does to your credit score? Bank doesn't care that the husband doesn't live there and deeded the property to her. Who's the borrower on the note? He is. Credit score dropped over 200 points for those 6 mortgage payments. Husband was forced to foreclose on her like a mortgage lender. That takes 2 months to post them the 20 and 21-day notices, just like any foreclosure. Go down there on the first Tuesday auction. It got auctioned off for $25,000. The amount of the delinquent mortgage payments was the amount that it sold for at auction. But the person that bought it knew that he was buying it subject to a $900,000 first lien. But he had faith that, fine, if title's clean, I'll pay 25, take on the 900. He was going to fix it up and flip it. Instead, he sold it 2 weeks later for 1.2. He made $300,000 in 2 weeks for going down to the courthouse. The shoulda, coulda, sell the property during the divorce. If you know the spouse that's going to get it has no chance of making the payments, sell it and give her the cash, but don't set yourself up for failure by imposing an obligation to refi something. And if they're emotionally, hey, if that's a way to stick it to you. So this was an easy slide to write and a painful slide to write. This was my story. I'm divorce horror story number 2. But here's a nice side note. That was a friend of mine, a colleague, not a great friend. Hey, I hope she'll come to and sell the house, and, I don't want to foreclose on her, but next Tuesday, if I really have to go down there, I'm selling it. I sell it for whatever I've got in it, missed mortgage payments, but you buy it subject to a first lien. He's Australian. Is title good, Paul? I'm like, well, I'm a title guy. Yeah, title's good. So anyway, he made the money my ex-wife's equity should have been if she had sold the property at arm's length instead of forcing me to foreclose. But she enjoyed the gamesmanship of making me foreclose. Anyway, oh yeah, the happy ending. People's Trust Credit Union, are they still around? It's the old Shell Federal Credit Union that rebranded. I haven't seen their name. They don't close their refis with us. I guess there are no refis right now. But People's Trust, good old little credit unions. They say they can never erase a black mark on your credit. They knew that I was trying to rearrange the sun, the moon, the sky to get this thing sold, foreclosed, get that mortgage paid off. They erased those 6 late pays. They can if they want to. They just submit it different. No, paid satisfactorily. My credit score jumped back to 800. Yes, I was out 6 months of aggravation, but a happy ending by everyone other than my ex-wife who was so stubborn. Summary, the types of divorce decree one more time. Spouse 1 gets the property clearly as their sole and separate property. Spouse 2 is divested of all rights. I love it when they get it right. There's no mortgage, or the mortgage is also in spouse 1's name alone, so no cross debt or whatever. I love it. Treat a single all day long. We don't need anyone other than spouse 1 at the closing table. Yay, they got it right. Spouse 1 gets the property, but spouse 2 is still on the mortgage. So spouse 1 gives spouse 2 an assumption deed of trust like I got, requiring spouse 1 to keep the mortgage paid. They do the right thing, and instead of just not paying the mortgage to screw with them, get in there and sell that thing or refi it. Treat a single. Again, it is theirs. They clearly got the property, and when that note goes away, that the assumption deed of trust is enforcing of hers, then her assumption deed of trust goes away also. And there's a new note in the name of the person that actually owns the property. Decree has defects in its wording or the legal description, or doesn't mention this property. No belts and suspenders with the backup deed. We absolutely treat them as married folks. I'm sorry. I hate to give you this news, but they are still married in the eyes of Texas law. Now, one could deed to the other now. We absolutely take deeds between spouses after divorce. These are just regular old not married people now. We love deeds between them after divorce, but are they going to sign it? Or they want to have one last? Or would you believe how many folks, Paul, you put a gun to my head. I don't know where to find her or him. It's been 10 years and I wouldn't even know where to look. We never had kids or whatever. Well, you got to find her. Spouses have to hire a listing agent, list a property for X, agree to sell it together. Y'all know the answer. Treat them as married, nothing divested the other. The judge didn't bang the gavel to anything meaningful about the real estate. Spouse 2 gets the property, but spouse 1 gets X amount upon the sale of it. Okay, we can still treat, you're going to say, big deal, Paul, that still takes both. We treat the seller as single. The spouse 2 got the property clearly, but because they owe some money back to spouse 1 on the sale of it, they're like a lender that we need a release of lien for. We still need to know how she wants her money. Oh, okay, yeah, we could wire it. We will need a release of lien. The payment to her specified in the decree is like another lien on the property. It's like a mortgage kind of. She is owed money when it sells. We got to respect that. We reviewed it. We know, so we really do treat her like a payoff lender, and we'll want a release of lien from her. All right, was that as much fun you could have without getting a divorce yourselves? If divorce wasn't fun enough, let's talk about death. Break, are y'all good? Yeah. How about just 5? Zoomers, is that okay? It's 12 after. Let's take about 5 minutes here, and then we'll crank up on some death.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sounds good.
Paul, can I ask you a question during break? why is it so easy for fraudulent deed transfers to go through? And you would think that the government would have some kind of a safeguard here. I have a niece that has rental property and their tenants. My niece said, "You just pay me the money to cover the mortgage payment, and after a while, I'll give you the property." So they assumed that was now their property. So they went to the courthouse and changed the deed into their name. And I found out that I found that out for my niece that their property was no longer in their name when I did a title search or looked on the website, the appraisal district. Somebody, well, they changed the name over to their name on the deed. I don't know what they have to do to actually do that, but why is this so easy? Why
Well,
doesn't the government protect us better?
It's coming. You've seen the news this week. Channel 2 is patting itself on, and that was nice. They discovered that. So if y'all aren't Channel 2 news folks or whatever, their investigative reporter, in looking into one thing, found out that a Mrs. Yancey has deeded several other properties into her name. I was joking with our examiner today. I bet if you look up Yancey as grantee, we know how to do stuff like that. You'll see a whole list of deeds. That's probably what Channel 2 did. And then they alerted these people, did you really deed your property to a Miss Yancey? In Texas, in general, only the seller, or we call them the grantor, signs the deed. You're presumed to want it, the grantee. The only time I put a grantee on a deed is if in a commercial deal, if we have a scorched earth as is provision. Hey, the seller disclaims as is, I disclaim everything about this property, and their lawyers want the buyer to sign off on that, then I will put the buyer on a deed. But otherwise, all it takes, a 2-page deed signed by the sellers, can convey the largest skyscraper or whatever, the most expensive property in this town, anywhere in Texas. But what we're seeing, so when you say, why can anyone do it so easy? It takes a forgery. Well, I think the lawmakers feel like we already have that on the books. It is a crime and a civil penalty, slander of title, for me to go forge your name on your property and deed it to me. So I think they figure they've got enough laws, but could we still put some safeguards down at the clerk's office? There was a time about 10 or 15 years ago, they were going to require a driver's license with every deed before they record it. They want to see the seller's driver's license. So they weren't going to put it in the property records that way, of course. They weren't going to scan it in, but at least, we e-record now. I don't have to send a runner with a stack of deeds every 2 weeks like I did when I started out. We e-record to the county through our service. It's almost like sending an email. 24-hour turnaround and it's recorded. Well, to me, that's not a bad step. If that cuts off a few forgeries, we'll attach the driver's license. Or I'll take it a step further. Why can't we DocuSign instruments, deeds, and deeds of trust in Texas yet? Y'all do the contract all day long, right? The county clerk will not accept a DocuSign deed. Oh, Paul, we're out of the country, or it's a cash buyer, right? You said there's only 5 documents. Can't I just DocuSign everything? You can, everything except the deed, which gets recorded in the property records at the county clerk's office. They don't accept DocuSign documents. It's coming, but whenever the state and county are involved, isn't it? There's cutting edge of technology, and what's the other edge called?
It's so interesting on the news report that you referred to. They weren't even going to press charges if she just agrees to
Just need it back. Yeah.
get back, right?
Yeah. The guys are,
Now she's going to do it with multiple other people if she's not going to be
Yeah.
put in jail or have any kind of repercussion.
the guys that broke out my window today, followed me from the bank, didn't get anything. So are they off the hook? Are they good? But it's coming. I mean, in this day of biometrics, I mean, why am I retina scan? Why am I looking? My iPhone can't tell it's me with sunglasses, and we don't have a better way to do a notarized deed other than an old school notary. Or hey, how about, yes, Miss Yancey's in trouble, but how about the notary that stamped for her? Why don't we prosecute them? You know, every wave of mortgage fraud, they perp walk just a few of them out and then make a big deal and put the news cameras. I'd love to see that notary that signed off on those forged deeds. So I guess the state thinks forgery is a crime. The notary commits a second crime, notarizing a fake signature they know is fake. It's a civil lawsuit. The title company wants to realize that a forged deed never conveys good title. So if she had somehow sold that thing, that property could get yanked back years later. It sucks. It sucks for the innocent buyer. But a forged, so I guess the state figures, how much more law could we put on the books? Can't the county clerks just safeguard this happening, so easily? All right, what do we say? Is that 5? You had Graceland. Yep. That's right. They claimed that Lisa Marie signed a deed of trust and hawked Graceland for some cash and had that thing posted for sale in Memphis. That's right. Again, perp walk some of these notaries. All right, I'll get off my horse. How do you like my divorce thing? I should give a shout out to someone. I just found that on the internet. I thought that was a good death symbol, but after divorce, how about something more upbeat? I got to package these classes different. Oh my goodness. Easily divorce. Yeah, yes. Well, in my experience, they run out of money. They run out of money. The siblings aren't real happy with each other. They're fighting about Johnny being named executor, and is that really Paul's last will, or is this his last will? So I see some skirmishes, but divorce, they just don't have the money to fight it out. Like somehow mad divorce couples find the money to pay the lawyers to drag it out. At least in my experience, I've never seen a probate last, 7 years like mine. All right, when the easiest, I like to start with the easiest. Unfortunately, we don't see it as much as I'd like. Your seller is deceased and they left a will and the family is taking the will through probate. Yay, that's as good as it gets. I love it. My underwriters love it. So does the family intend to probate it? I have to ask them that. Okay, I'm so sorry. Your dad died when? Okay, 6 months ago. First American, they've got to be dead 6 months. Fidelity doesn't care. Yes, we can definitely close that. Did he leave a will? Our first question. Yes, written will. Got a copy of it. I'll send it over. Are you going to probate the will? Do y'all realize a will doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot if not taken through probate? Probate is the legal process that empowers the will, that lets that will spring forth and become a court order. Yeah, Paul is named executor, but if you don't probate the will and letters testamentary issued for Paul, then you got no powers of an executor to sell the property or anything else. So it's two different questions. Did the decedent leave a will? And are you, family as a whole, are you going to probate the will? You wouldn't believe how many don't have to probate it. It's not that hard. You got to hire a probate lawyer. You don't want to try to do it yourself. Generally, I used to quote my probate buddies tell me 3 to 6 months for a cut and dried one. Oh, that feels like legal fees of 10 to 20,000. I'm kind of pulling that stuff out of my you-know-what. But a couple of questions for you.
Yeah, so on deals like this, if the assets have been placed in like a family trust or something, you can avoid probate.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Put it in a trust. An LLC can be outside. Well, if you've dealt with who owns the LLC.
Yeah.
Transfer on death deed. All great tools to avoid probate. I told my own brother the other day. He was lamenting about his will update. I'm like, it's a good idea. You need a will. You need to update it. Not every 20 years, but a will should be thought of as your backup parachute. I mean, unless you're Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, unless you just got, if you plan right, and I hate to sound cold, but especially if you see it coming. I have to read death certificates when I do affidavits of heirship, cause of death. They had this bad cancer for 3 years and still died without a will. I mean, maybe did the family not want to press the issue because they didn't want them to give up the fight, or would that make them think the family had given up? I mean, you saw this coming with bad cancer, this one immediate car wreck, and you still don't put a will in place. But with some planning, putting your next of kin on bank accounts, stock accounts. I love the tide, you can tell, for specific real estate. We can stack up several pieces of real estate in the same tide. With a little planning, you don't need the will. You darn sure won't need to probate it, but it's a nice backup. Kind of like our divorce decree. There are some parallels with divorce. A well-written divorce decree is our backup parachute. If we didn't do a deed, then the will is a nice backup parachute. But again, no legal effect on its own. People want to trot that out for me and show me who was to get her property. And she died 10 years ago. You've only got 4 years to probate a will, to open an administration following death. 4 years. I'm like, you never probated it. Not in any county? Nowhere? No? Oh. They have to sign it in front of 2 witnesses, preferably with a self-proving affidavit. And my probate friend said the other day, Paul, I know in this day and age, no one cares about originals anymore. Trust me, a blue ink original. He only does uncontested, easy probates, but I like that. That's what a lot of my clients need. Uncontested, easy probates. He said the blue ink original still counts down in probate court. Right. Handwritten, few more hoops to jump through, that works. Their regular will with some notations. Okay, can you prove up that's them and not the person who's receiving, whatever extra gift? So there's a few wrinkles, but I don't want to sound anti-will. A will is a great idea. But so far in my 20 years almost, let's say I've been approached 500 times with families that had Pawpaw or Mama's will, perfectly good will. 490 of those 500 times, we didn't need to probate it because I could use an affidavit of heirship. I'm not going to ignore the will. I'm going to attach the will to my affidavit of heirship. Now, what if the affidavit of heirship, so if we kind of pretend for a second they died without a will, they had 2 kids. The 2 kids, and they're still alive, 2 kids inherited everything 50-50. But in the will, only one of the kids was to receive it. Who do you think I need to have sign at closing? They didn't probate the will and we're rolling with an affidavit of heirship instead. Attaching the will also, though. I need them both. If you just wanted Johnny and not Johnny and Susie, then go probate the will. But if we're going to play along and kind of act like the will, I use too many words. It's kind of like the greatest, is that denominator or whatever. I need the maximum number of people that could have an interest. Only one of you would have inherited there, but you probate the will. Both of you to sign. Both of you are my owners and my sellers at closing. 2 to 4 months, 10 to 20,000. I just upped the price of my affidavit of heirship because they're hard. They take me a couple of hours. The family never gives me all the information on the first pass. There's back and same reason I wouldn't touch a will. So I charge $700 or $800 and I'm done in a week. So 2 to 4 months, 10 to 20,000. But that's not me trying to cut out my probate friends, but it gets you to the same result. If I can clear title to your house and First American and Fidelity are both fine with it, but we still want to attach that will because they just died. A will could be probated for 4 years. How about if the church gets it? Well, that's a bad example because that church is going to say, that's our house now. But they're all getting together. They're cool. But a niece was to inherit if the will was probated. But her 2 children, who she loved, but they're wealthy, they had their own money. She felt bad for her poor niece. So the 2 kids would get it through an affidavit of heirship, a niece through the will. Who do you think I need to sign at closing? Rolling with an affidavit of heirship with will attached. I need all 3 of them. I need all three. Or niece could deed to, or brother and sister could deed. Here's where it gets squirrely. That may be on the next slide. Hang on a second when we talk about his and her kids. A will is the only way to say blank inherits a property. If that wouldn't have been the person under the laws that under Texas descent, which are what we used for the affidavit of heirship. Sometimes the family still needs to probate the will, for other purposes. I had two 20-something, their 50-year-old mom died unexpectedly. I could roll with an affidavit of heirship. They would get it under her will. We were good. Merrill Lynch or Schwab or someone, they were not going to be impressed with my affidavit of heirship. She probated the will to free up the stock. So I'm like, well, it's kind of like shoot all the hostages. If you're going to probate the will for that reason, you might as well deal with the house that way too. Because probate, again, I love it. You know how quick we can sell one? We don't need the probate completely wrapped up, for your question as well. The divorce, we need absolutely over the finish line. But probate, if the probate court has admitted the will, given out notice and accepted that as the last will, and appointed the executor, given them letters testamentary, and an inventory is filed. Or we could roll with an affidavit in lieu of an inventory. You know what we're looking for? Were they so rich they triggered estate taxes? Currently $6 million for your half of community property. We don't see a lot of $6 millionaires, but sometimes. But with those three things, we could close the sale of the house. The executor is our seller. So look, don't get me wrong. I love it when they probate the will. My underwriters, we feel more certain. The probate lawyer is going to check for debts and make sure everything gets paid and the funeral home, the probate court is involved. A probate lawyer is involved. The executor has certain powers given to them in Texas. So we sleep better at night, to tell you the truth, when they probate the will and we're only dealing with the executor. Sometimes my underwriters are funny. Even though Johnny, the lead son, is the executor, they still want to hear from the other three children who all inherited the house equally, the four of them. The executor has the power to sell it alone. And I've had this fight many times, but Fidelity and First American too want to at least an email communication is enough to hear from the other siblings that they're on board with the appointed executor signing a loan. They get mad at me. I hear from their lawyer, the probate code, whatever, says that independent executor needs no one's input. I'm like, that's cool. We're in the title insurance business and my underwriters require it. So end of story. And if you want to go down the street, it's Fidelity and First American. And if everyone else is following their guidance, it will be anywhere. Fine. And all I'm asking for is an email. So anyway, so we love a probated will. But how about when there's no will at all, 95% of us, or the family says, we've got no reason, Paul, if you don't need it to sell the house, that's all mama had. No will or the family doesn't intend, we roll with an affidavit of heirship to shore up title with the heirs. The order of descent and distribution in Texas, about what you would think it would be. You look to the spouse, to the children, to the parents. If no one ever married, every once in a while I'm rounding up parents. Only one still alive, okay. Siblings, I've gone as far as nephews, nieces, and cousins when that was the closest family. But there's a hierarchy of who. They didn't leave anyone, Paul. I mean, no one. I guarantee there is someone that inherited their property. In Texas, there has to be. We will keep on and keep on and keep on. Someone inherits your property when you die without a will. We have a framework of law that says who it is and what order you go through. What is included in my beloved affidavit of heirship? It's not that hard. I think they're usually 3 pages. When and where the decedent was born and died, how many times he was married, naming the spouse, naming the dates. No, the third wife doesn't like giving me information about the first wife, the widow, but I'm sorry, we got to have a complete information. Number of children, their names, dates of birth, addresses he had during his lifetime, signed by at least one family member, I don't care who, and 2 non-family witnesses not related by blood or marriage. I've shot down 1,000 times when they're nice and honest, knew the decedent how, sister-in-law, brother-in-law, nephew, at least they're honest and tell me, no, I'm sorry, not, they're in prison. How are we going to get signed? They have notaries in prison. I've sent plenty of stuff in Huntsville, but we can't skip information. My underwriters feel like they're being pretty generous, letting us insure title this way. And I just remind the family that there is a probate proceeding if you don't have a will. Probate court isn't locked to anyone that doesn't have one of those, there are lawsuits to determine heirship. You can go down there, don't know what the retainer will be for that lawyer, but I'm sure for a price you could get there. There is a probate process if you don't want to go through this route voluntarily with me. But generally I can get them to come around and just, hey, can't close without you. Can't close without you. Buyers getting antsy. I need the information. I've got 3 blanks left in this thing. I hate them and love them at the same time. But once we get, they need to have known the decedent 10+ years. They'll give me a witness. Year first met them, 2015. Wait a minute. When did Pawpaw die? 2018. He knew them 3 years? No. 10+ years. My underwriter's thinking that's long. You played dominoes on Friday. You went out to dinner. You hung out together. Neighbors are perfect. Neighbors make perfect witnesses for affidavits of heirship. And you know what? A husband and wife neighbor can count as both of them. So a family member and 2 unrelated witnesses that will swear to God. I put the perjury clause right above their signature. Hey, someone who in an official document, blah, 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 who lies 2 to 10 years in the joint and the fine, there it is. So thank you, family members. If the unprobated will names someone other than who have inherited, again, I need them all to sign then. So any questions with the affidavit of heirship, even attaching a will that the family doesn't intend to probate, but if it names someone, it expands me from just the affidavit of heirship itself, I need them all to sign. I've used them thousands of times. They work well. I just need the family to not get lazy. The worst thing, the grandparent level is where the deed chain stops. I was over in the Heights, of course. 10, just because families hang on to their property so long. The grandparents were the last in title. 12 aunts and uncles. Half of them are dead. 6, I ended up with 25 total heirs. 23 were willing to sign a deed over to daughter who's lived there, paid taxes. Everyone considered it hers. 2 cousins held out. They all went to court. We closed about 8 months later. I ended up sending them $4,000 each from the closing table. Bet you their legal fees were more than that. But the problem with an affidavit of heirship in big families, or if they've been dead a long time, finding good witnesses, and the greater that family tree expands on you before you stop and deal with it, the tougher to get everyone on the same page if a bunch of people inherited. Okay, but I added this last night at 10:30. Property never automatically transfers to even a surviving spouse. All of our children were together. It's never, or anyone else in Texas, it's never automatic. I see it more and more and more because this is what I do for a living. I think it's counterintuitive. They were married 60 years. I mean, I'm sorry. We still need the affidavit of heirship because we were talking about before I came. All right. Technically, it was automatic. Dying without a will, that person inherited the property. But when I say it's not automatic, we still have to shore that up. It's never action free. We must do the affidavit of heirship simply to establish that, yep, he was married one time, his childhood sweetheart, great story, 66 years, a whole passel of kids together, all together. And of course she inherits his half and is now in a position to sell it. It still takes an affidavit of heirship. It's never, ever, ever, ever automatic. And the problem, I get the widow coming in to sell it, and he died 20 years ago. You know how hard it is to find anyone, and he lived to a ripe old age of 90, 20 years ago. He's a bit younger. I mean, older, his widow was a bit younger than him. You know how hard it is to find a witness from 20 years ago? So we try, but it's never automatic. Yes, ma'am? Yeah. Texas property, husband and wife bought it during marriage. So community property, owned 50-50. One has died, where, then yeah, affidavit of heirship will shore that up, Kathy. You bet. That is the simplest kind. Oh, I discount a little. Married one time, not 20 kids I have to name. That's as good as it gets. Very easy to shore up the widow, but it still takes that effort. Someone's going to have to do it someday. And I hate to write, people approach me when they're not even about to sell one, and I love them for that. Yeah, let's do it, because it's already been what, 8 years, and he was 80 then. We better get this thing on file. What do you think? No. The affidavit of heirship does its own thing as if there wasn't a will. An affidavit of heirship doesn't even draw a conclusion. It lays out the family, their life and times. It's kind of like an obituary on steroids. It lays out your children, where you were born, when you died. It's supposed to have cause of death. I took that out. It just, the kids hated seeing the pancreatic cancer one more time or whatever. We put that to make sure they weren't murdered by someone about to inherit the property. If you kill someone, you are excluded from inheriting their property under the laws of descent and distribution in Texas. But otherwise, you're good to go. It simply lays it out to where, if drafted right, and then a seasoned title examiner reviews it like that. Oh, okay, married, all the kids with her. All right, no problem. It's her property. The affidavit of heirship acts like this is going to sound cold, a deed from the grave, deeding her, often the deceased husband, deeding his widow, shoring up that interest. It confirms, but it's funny, it doesn't draw a conclusion. I can tell when a rookie or an attorney who doesn't practice in that area much tries to draw one up, and therefore the heir. No. You lay it out. We will decide who inherited the property. So when you say, does it conform with the will? We've got to make them fit together. Right. It expands it. We're not going to ignore who was to receive in the will. But if we never ever probate that will, it's going to be as if they died without one. So we're going to do an affidavit of heirship to determine the heirs at law. We're going to record them together in the property records for the whole world to see. And the outbound deed is going to be signed by all of them. I'm going to throw a net over all the potential owners. Because like a loaded gun, what if that will is later probated? They come in there and close with us a month after death, and we roll with an affidavit of heirship and attach the will. At least they're honest and give us the will. Not going to probate it. What if that thing does get probated? So we respect it. Here's a funny thing about title. We're always happy to have extra people sign deeds. Is that weird to you guys? A lot of people scratch their heads at that. We are always welcome to add more people. Wait a minute, Paul. That's a general warranty deed. It says that I warrant that the title is good and I convey my interest. I'll give a quick, they mispronounce it quick, like quick. I'll give a quick claim deed. No, you won't. That's worthless. We add people to deeds all the time, not to put them in a bind over the title warranties within that deed, but to capture their interest, to make sure we never hear a peep out of them down the road. If Susie got it, if the niece Susie got it through the will, but Bobby and Sally would have got it if there wasn't a will or if it's never probated, but all three signed my deed, I'm golden, right? I got you either way. Or I forgot her name. Who'd I name the niece? She deeds over to them, or brother and sister more likely will deed to her. Ah, well, if mama left it to her, in fact, they're a little mad at me. Why do you even need us then, Paul, title guy? You got a perfectly good will. I know, but you're not going to probate it, or you hadn't yet. And now you've got a buyer that wants to close for cash in 2 weeks. It's my way or no way, or put this thing on hold for a couple of months. Either way. What do you think? Ah, great question. Eventually, someone's probably going to own, hopefully they've already been in it 20 plus years. I either have to send them to a litigation friend and they start a suit to quiet title. By God, I've got a lot of interest. I've lived here 20 years, paid taxes, inherited 60% from my grandma. So I've got a lot of interest. Texas law says you can't make co-owners keep owning together if one wants to sell. You can drag everyone along with you in what you call a suit to partition, and you can make everyone sell. Those cousins, the 23 versus the 2, they sued the 2 and they countersued to make them go along with the sale. So the 60, I had someone come in there, he's got 30 heirs. He's tracked down 20 of them. I said, Johnny, that's a great start. At some point, you're not going to get to 100%. Round up every deed you can, though. The affidavit of heirship laid out the pool. You're getting deeds from them, the ones that are nice, knowing you've maintained it for 30 years. The rest, you may need to do a suit to quiet title. You serve them with notice, and at that point, hopefully they'll do the right thing and walk away from that interest, give you a deed or whatever. That's track 1, litigation, sue the ones that won't go along. Track 2, I've had good luck when someone's owned it 30 and lived in it, occupied it continuously, hostile, open adverse possession, 30 plus years. Wasn't you guys a widow down in Pearland, I think, is where the property's located, 34 years. Contract for deed, and she never got the deed. That family's not interested in helping. They're dead and scattered in the wind. 30 years of uninterrupted possession. I was able to shore it up with an affidavit of use and possession. You know what adverse possession? Squatter's rights. I hate to say that, though. A squatter is thought as someone evil that jumps in there and just tries to take it as her own. But technically, she lived there without title, without a deed for 30 plus years. I checked HCAD the other day. I said, ma'am, I assure you we could sell that house tomorrow. HCAD has its own rules, so I'm not sure they will respect my handiwork, my affidavit, and let you have you and change the name to you at HCAD and give you a homestead in over 65. I checked last week. Her name is in HCAD and they gave her homestead and over 65. Hey. So we have our other tools, but it's expensive and hard. It's so much better at the family. You see the importance, though. It's not like it has an expiration date and has to be done within blank months or years, but it's just tougher. It's tougher. You hate to make the family rush on in after someone's died, but golly, it's just hard. The grandparents as the last ones in title is the hardest thing I do. I'm sorry, I started turning them away. If there's more than 20 heirs and you can't tell me everyone's, on the same page, I can't charge enough for the time that goes into that. So again, here's my scenarios. Who inherits a property under the following scenarios? And we're wrapping it up. A lot of people don't get this. There is no will. So we're stuck with affidavit of heirship, the laws of descent and distribution. All of decedent's children are with his surviving spouse. The property was bought during marriage, so his own 50-50. He's died, but all of his children he ever had on the planet, adopted or otherwise. I had someone fight me. Oh, that was just a child out of wedlock in his 20s. That's still his child. And why didn't you put it on the questionnaire? All the children are with her. she inherits his 50% interest. The easiest affidavit I do. The law changed in 92. Before 92, the children inherited his half, no matter if he'd been married to her 70 years and had 20 kids all with hers, the children still got his half. In 92, our folks in Austin said, that's their mother. All the children he ever had are with her. Why shouldn't she get it? And I think they're absolutely right. So we don't care how many kids, or if some of them are dead and we're at their grandkid level, thank God she's still alive. His property goes to her if all the kids are with her. The simplest affidavit we do. Uh-oh, they had 10 kids together, but he had one child with someone else. Changes the whole result. Then those 11 children as a group inherit his 50% undivided interest, even if it's his only property, even if it's the homestead. The children got it, not his widow. If they're willing to, and 60 to 70% of the time they are, maybe 80 on a good month. They're willing to deed the property to stepmama, because heck, they were married 42 years. Come on. This isn't Anna Nicole Smith and who'd she marry at 96? This is a very long second marriage. We can't help the fact that the kids inherited his half of the house. Sorry, that's the law in Texas. But if willing, they deed to her, widow sells, we're all good. But what if they aren't willing to do that? We got to have them. Again, she could sue to partition, but they inherited that piece. There's nothing we can do about it. So what am I stressing here? People with his and her children. If all the children are together, hey, that's awesome. Texas, I hate to say you don't need a will, but the Texas law of descent takes pretty good care of widows or widowers if all the children are together. But oh my God, you got his, hers, and ours. You need a will or a TOD, transfer on death deed, if you've got his and her children, for sure. This has to be the craziest though. A guy in Katy kills himself. I have to read all the self-inflicted gunshot wound to the mouth. So he plans enough to leave a suicide note but died without a will. He'd given up a child who was 25, was now in North Carolina. He'd given up parental rights so that kid could be adopted by his mother's new husband. I'm not saying the guy that killed himself didn't, he probably had, hey, will you give up rights so he can, I want his name, I don't know the backstory, but that child I had to round up inherited his 50% of the house, even though he'd given up and severed all parental rights so Johnny could be adopted by someone else. But that kid, he was not happy to hear from me, signed a deed back to stepmom, back to the widow, and she sold the property. But would it have worked the other way? If the kid he gave up parental rights grew up and became Bill Gates and died without a will, I don't think the Bill Gateses die without a will, but you're with me, did very well, died without a will, had no kids or wife, would the dad have inherited from him who he'd given up rights to? No, it's a one-way street. You give up parental rights to be their parent, but they still inherit from you if you die without a will, but it doesn't work the other way. That had to be one of the more bizarre results. What do you think?
Well, I have another scenario. I like your opinion
Sure.
on. Child is given up at birth to an adoption agency in the state. 50 years later, the mother and the child reunite, friendly, all of that. The child has 4 children, so the current mother has 4 grandchildren. Who gets her share?
Oh, that's a great question. Legally adopted. They were legally adopted. The child who we're kind of getting into more, parent family kind of law, but I am pretty certain by being adopted, they step into all rights, all rights. Adoption, I remember this from law school for the bar. Adoption is absolutely the same as biological for every single facet of Texas law I've ever studied. Good question, though. Hey, there's my smiling face. Okay, is it time to update the picture? It is 18 years ago. Hey, could I be a realtor? Nah, sorry, that's 18 years ago. What do you think?
In the event of a death, this is a kind of a commercial question. You have husband and wife own an S corp. Husband and wife, and so you have three directors, husband, wife, and a third party.
Mm-hmm.
You have one of the directors die, the husband or the wife. What do you do? What do you do with the what happens with the property that's owned by the S corp if one of the parents who is a director passes?
Great question. The S corp still owns the property. Let's start with that. But you know how us pesky title people are. You say LLC or corp owner, and I'm number one, I want it in good standing. I fought with someone last week. Can't we just skip to the owners? No, get it back in good standing. You should have been filing your property tax, your franchise tax reports. But the entity owns it, but it's all about who has the authority to sign for the entity, right? So we look to the formation docs and the bylaws. Generally, the ownership of that S corp is property like anything else. So their will, if you probate a will, and it said so-and-so gets my property, including if you don't name the S corp, but it's in the remainder clause, maybe the will says who got it. But if we need to go to that level, but we don't hardly ever need to get to the shareholder level, other than, did you say there's a missing board seat? Were they a director?
So you've got three directors, husband, wife, and a third director.
From a title perspective, I doubt I have to get into the ownership to establish control, reading their docs. I bet the bylaws say how you fill that board seat, or if two of the three could make decisions like selling the property, then I'm good. I'm not going to go any further than that. We hardly ever have to touch ownership as much as we have to touch management, board of directors, managers of an LLC. We hardly ever have to get to the ownership level. But I just need to know, are two remaining directors enough? Or could y'all appoint a third one? Says you got to have unanimous, you got to have three. Here's how you appoint it. Here's how you fill an empty one. We might have to have them fill that board seat and then authorize the sale. Churches, churches love to set up deacons, directors, trustees, have 10 of them, but not update their records for 10 years. It's so hard to get a church nailed down. Who's got the current power to convey the church property is harder than anything. But we just ferreted out like that. So big picture, I wanted the takeaway. Y'all were a great class, by the way. Great questions. The takeaway: death and divorce have a lot in common from the title side, is why I package them together. They're not just my least two favorite topics, but the two topics I seem to spend the most time on. I do, but they have one thing in common for sure. If you're on the listing side, well, and buy side too, if you know you're looking at a property that's an estate deal or divorce deal, the sooner we can dig into it. It scares the heck out of me when a deceased seller deal or divorce seller deal. Normally we love a 3-week cash close, right? Nothing's better than those, unless there's work to be done. I love it if during the listing phase is a great time. It doesn't take that much. My commitment to open title is, Clara, will you at least fight for me? We'll put a little time into it, but you'll fight for me and tell the other side that we've got real work in this thing, right? 99 out of 100 times, that's enough. You're not just playing who's my favorite title company. Title's really open over there and we're ready to go. I'll prove it with a commitment if you want. But God, that extra time. to see the decree, to see if there's a probated. Rob had one, 2 or 3 week closing and the family's just starting probate. It's not my place to talk them out of probating a will once they've hired an attorney. And I mean, I'm kind of stuck. But a 3 week close and he hasn't filed, he got the will approved yet, that's tight. Someone starts saying extension, please. So just the one thing they have in common, we can deal with about any issue from divorce or death, but it takes time. Be careful if you are lucky enough to know in advance. I'd love to pop open title sooner rather than later. I'll hang for questions, but if you want to dismiss the main part of the class, I never run late. Never, ever, ever run late. So y'all have got your 2 hours. Zoomers, hang if you want to hear any of these questions. Do we know their license numbers?
And then guys, I was just gonna say last thing, thank you so much. Again, Kathy Crittenden and Infinity.
Can you repeat the question so we can hear, please?
I'm just giving thanks. Thank you, Mary, and both of you for reaching out and, giving us the opportunity to answer your questions and things like that. And Mary, for you to work with Paul. But please, I'm here to earn your contracts. I need your support. I've been there 5 months and I'm asking, give me a shot. The next time you have the opportunity to put me or someone on your contract, I hope that it's Kathy Crittenden Infinity. We are known to take those transactions to infinity and beyond. I'm just trying to help you all remember where I am. So again, thank you so much. Hopefully I'll see some of you tomorrow for the Crime Stoppers event. And thank you. I know. And thank you again, Paul. And those on Zoom, Clara's going to get your information and we'll get you your CE. Thanks, everybody.